Listen to me carefully, because what I am about to say may shake you, may unsettle you, and may awaken something deep within your spirit. Today, while you were busy moving, planning, striving, worrying, running, speaking, deciding, and reacting, God was watching. And God laughed, not in mockery, not in cruelty, but in a way that exposes how small our fear is compared to His power, how limited our thinking is compared to His wisdom, how frantic our effort is compared to His sovereignty. God laughed at what you did today, not because you failed, but because you forgot who He is. You woke up this morning carrying yesterday's burdens as if they were permanent. You replayed conversations. You feared outcomes that have not yet happened. You stressed over problems that God already saw the solution to long before you were born. You calculated your future with human logic, human limitations, human strength, and God laughed, not because your effort was useless, but because you tried to handle divine matters with human hands. You tried to control what only God governs. You tried to fix what only God can heal. You tried to predict what only God already knows. God laughed when you panicked over lack because He owns abundance. God laughed when you doubted your worth because He created you with intention. God laughed when you feared tomorrow because tomorrow is already standing before Him. God laughed when you thought you were alone because His presence never left you, not for one moment. God laughed because you looked at the storm instead of the one who commands the storm. Do you know why this matters? Because the laughter of God is not ridicule. It is revelation. It reveals how unnecessary your fear was. It reveals how misplaced your trust became. It reveals how often you forget that God is not reacting to life the way you are. God is not surprised. God is not confused. God is not overwhelmed. God is not scrambling for answers. God is not anxious about outcomes. God does not lose sleep over the things that keep you awake at night. Today you rushed, but God is never in a hurry. Today you worried, but God never worries. Today you doubted, but God never questions His own power. Today you felt weak, but God is strength itself. Today you felt delayed, but God is never late. Today you felt overlooked, but God never takes His eyes off you. You see, the problem is not that God laughed. The problem is that you forgot how big God is. You reduced God to the size of your problem instead of lifting your problem to the size of God. You allowed circumstances to speak louder than divine truth. You allowed fear to preach to you all day long, and fear is a liar. Fear magnifies shadows and shrinks reality. Fear tells you that you are running out of time, running out of strength, running out of options. But God laughs at fear because fear has no authority where God rules. When God laughed today, it was because He saw you striving where you were meant to trust. He saw you exhausting yourself trying to open doors that He already decided to open at the right moment. He saw you trying to prove yourself to people who have no control over your destiny. He saw you chasing validation when your value was already sealed by Him. He saw you fighting battles that were never assigned to you. You must understand this deeply. God does not expect you to carry what He promised to carry for you. God does not require you to figure out what He already ordained. God does not need your panic to accelerate His plan. God does not need your fear to stay alert. God does not need your stress to stay powerful. God does not need your sleepless nights to stay in control. Today you measured yourself by your mistakes, but God measures you by His purpose. Today you judged yourself by your progress, but God sees the entire journey. Today you thought you were behind, but God knows exactly where you are supposed to be. Today you looked at your resources and said, this is not enough, and God laughed because He has never depended on your resources to fulfill His will. God laughed when you said, I don't know how this will work, because He never needed your understanding. God laughed when you said, I don't see a way, because He creates ways where none exist. God laughed when you said, I am tired, because His strength does not run out. God laughed when you said, I cannot, because He already said, I will. Let me speak to the part of you that feels pressure to have everything figured out. That pressure is not from God. God does not rush His children. God does not push them into panic. God does not shame them for growth that takes time. God works in seasons, not seconds. God develops depth, not shortcuts. God builds endurance, not illusions. Today you may feel like nothing significant happened. You may feel like your effort went unnoticed. You may feel like your prayers hit the ceiling. But God laughed because you measured today by visible results, while He measured it by internal alignment. God saw how something shifted inside you that you cannot yet see. God saw how something broke off of you that no one else noticed. God saw how a seed was planted in silence. God laughed because you thought today was ordinary. But He knows how many turning points begin quietly. God laughed because you thought today was small. But He knows that obedience in small things creates authority in great things. God laughed because you underestimated the power of consistency, humility, patience, and trust. There are moments when God laughs, not because you are wrong, but because you are early. You are early in your understanding, early in your growth, early in your vision, early in your confidence, early in your strength. God sees the finished work while you are still learning the process. Today you apologize for things God already forgave. You carry guilt God already released. You punished yourself for lessons God already redeemed. God laughed because you kept reopening doors He already closed. God laughed because you kept rehearsing failures He already transformed into wisdom. Do you realize how often you argue with God through worry? Every time you worry, you are saying, God, I don't trust you with this. Every time you panic, you are saying, God, I think this is too big for you. Every time you despair, you are saying, God, I don't believe you can handle what I cannot. And yet God does not strike you down for this. God laughs, not in offense, but in mercy, because He knows you are still learning how to rest. God laughed today because you forgot that He is not limited by what limits you. He is not bound by time, space, systems, people, economies, opinions, or patterns. He is not intimidated by resistance. He is not threatened by delay. He is not discouraged by opposition. He is not confused by complexity. You see obstacles, God sees opportunities. You see walls, God sees doors. You see endings, God sees beginnings. You see loss, God sees repositioning. You see weakness, God sees dependency. You see emptiness, God sees room to fill. When God laughed today, He was reminding the universe that your life is not random. Your pain is not wasted. Your waiting is not meaningless. Your struggle is not invisible. Your effort is not ignored. God is not detached from your life. He is deeply involved. Even when you cannot feel it, you must stop interpreting silence as absence. God does some of His greatest work in silence. You must stop interpreting delay as denial. God often delays to deepen you, not to destroy you. You must stop interpreting difficulty as punishment. Difficulty is often preparation disguised as resistance. God laughed because you tried to rush growth that requires endurance. You tried to harvest what had not yet matured. You tried to escape processes that were shaping your character. God is more interested in who you are becoming than what you are achieving. God knows that what you can hold tomorrow depends on who you become today. Today, you compared your life to others. God laughed because comparison blinds you to your own assignment. You are not called to run someone else's race. You are not equipped for someone else's path. You are not designed for someone else's purpose. God custom designed your journey, your pace, your timing. God laughed because you thought your value was negotiable. Your value is not based on productivity. It is not based on applause. It is not based on approval. It is not based on success. Your value is established by God Himself, and nothing you did today increased it or diminished it. You must hear this clearly. God is not disappointed in you the way you are disappointed in yourself. God sees effort where you see failure. God sees intention where you see inconsistency. God sees growth where you see struggle. God sees faith forming even when doubt still whispers. God laughed because you thought you had to earn what He gives freely. You thought you had to deserve peace, deserve rest, deserve guidance, deserve mercy. God gives because He is God, not because you perform perfectly. There are things you did today that you regret, words you wish you could take back, moments you wish you handled differently. God laughed because He already knew you would grow beyond today. God laughed because today did not define you. God laughed because He already accounted for your humanity in His plan. You are not behind schedule. You are not off course. You are not forgotten. You are not abandoned. You are not disqualified. God's laughter today was not a dismissal. It was a declaration that He is still in control, still involved, still committed to completing what He started. So stop carrying tomorrow on your shoulders tonight. Stop replaying today as if it has the authority to impress on you. Stop shrinking God down to the size of your understanding. Lift your eyes, lift your trust, lift your expectations. God has not changed His mind about you. When God laughed today, He was inviting you to rest, to trust, to release, to surrender. Not because nothing matters, but because He matters more. Let that laughter free you from fear, loosen the grip of anxiety, silence the voice of doubt, and awaken your confidence in the one who holds everything together, even when you feel like you are falling apart. Let me take you deeper now, because there is another layer to God's laughter that many never understand. God laughed today not only because of what you feared, but because of what you underestimated. You underestimated the authority God placed within you when you chose to trust Him even imperfectly. You underestimated the power of alignment when your heart leaned toward Him, even while your mind wrestled. You underestimated how much heaven responds to sincerity more than perfection. God does not wait for flawless people to move. He waits for willing hearts. You may think today was filled with hesitation, but God saw the moments you could have given up and did not. God saw the restraint you exercised when anger wanted to speak. God saw the patience you showed when frustration demanded action. God saw the quiet obedience that no one applauded. And God laughed, not because it was small, but because you thought it was insignificant. There is a kind of laughter that comes from confidence. And God's confidence has never been shaken by human instability. God is not alarmed by your questions. God is not threatened by your weakness. God is not offended by your learning process. He is eternal wisdom, guiding temporary minds, infinite clarity, working with limited sight. That is why God can laugh where you tremble. You see a moment, God sees a movement. You see today, God sees generations. You see survival, God sees legacy. You see yourself barely holding on. God sees you being strengthened by every pressure you face. Pressure does not crush what God sustains. It reveals what God has already built inside you. God laughed today because you forgot that resistance often means relevance. If what you were doing did not matter, it would not be challenged. If your growth was insignificant, it would not be uncomfortable. God allows tension not to harm you, but to stretch your capacity so you can carry what is coming without breaking. There are prayers you whispered today that felt weak to you, but they rose strong before God because they were honest. God does not require volume. He responds to truth. God does not need eloquence. He honors humility. God does not demand performance. He seeks surrender. And God laughed because you judged your prayer by how it sounded instead of by how real it was. God is not waiting for you to become fearless. He is teaching you how to move while fear still whispers. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is obedience that refuses to be ruled by fear. God laughed because you obeyed even while unsure, and that kind of obedience shifts atmospheres. Let me tell you something that will unsettle your pride but heal your soul. God does not consult your insecurity before fulfilling His purpose. He does not pause His plan until you feel ready. If God waited for confidence, nothing would ever move forward. He moves through trust, not self-assurance. He advances through dependence, not ego. Today you thought you disappointed God because you felt inconsistent. God laughed because He knows growth is not linear. There are steps forward and pauses, clarity and confusion, strength and fatigue. God does not abandon you in the valleys. He teaches you there. Valleys deepen roots, valleys train discernment, valleys strip illusions and reveal what is real. God laughed because you thought your mistakes disqualified you, when in reality they refined you. Every misstep taught you something success never could. Every delay corrected direction you did not even know was wrong. Every closed door protected you from outcomes you were not ready to face. You must stop demanding instant results from eternal processes. God operates beyond urgency. He is not moved by deadlines or pressure. He is moved by purpose. When God acts, He acts with precision, not panic. His timing is not slow, it is exact. God laughed today because you tried to read your life backward. You judged your future by your past. You evaluated your calling by your current condition. God does not work that way. He speaks identity before evidence. He declares outcomes before beginnings. He calls things into being before they appear. You may feel small right now, but seeds are small too. You may feel hidden, but roots grow in darkness. You may feel unseen, but foundations are built underground. God often hides what He is about to elevate. God often conceals what He intends to protect. God laughed because you worried about being overlooked, but heaven has never lost sight of you. Human recognition is temporary. Divine alignment is permanent. When God positions you, no opinion can remove you. When God opens a path, no resistance can block it. There are lessons God is teaching you now that will one day become wisdom others depend on. There are struggles shaping compassion within you that will later become healing for many. God laughed because you thought this season was only about you, but it is preparing you to carry responsibility with humility. God is not just building outcomes, He is building character. He is forming discernment, patience, endurance, and trust. Without these, success becomes dangerous. Without these, authority collapses. God loves you too much to promote you before you are prepared. Today you try to control what God asked you to release. Control is often disguised fear. When you control, you limit. When you trust, you expand. God laughed because He knows you are safest when you surrender what you cannot manage anyway. You must understand this. God is not asking you to ignore reality. He is asking you to anchor yourself in truth higher than reality. Circumstances change. Feelings fluctuate. Opinions shift. But God remains constant. When you anchor yourself in Him, you stop being tossed by every wave of uncertainty. God laughed because you thought rest meant stopping, when rest actually means trusting. You can be busy and still rested if your heart is anchored in God. You can be still and exhausted if your mind is ruled by fear. True rest comes from knowing who is in control. There is a peace God offers that does not depend on answers. There is a confidence God gives that does not require evidence. There is a strength God provides that does not come from ease. God laughed because you were searching for reassurance when His presence was already enough. You are not called to predict the future. You are called to walk faithfully today. You are not responsible for outcomes. You are responsible for obedience. You are not required to understand everything. You are required to trust the one who does. God laughed because you thought your capacity defined your limit, when in truth your obedience defines your expansion. God enlarges those who trust Him. He strengthens those who lean on Him. He elevates those who remain teachable. Let go of the version of yourself that believes you must struggle endlessly to be worthy. Let go of the belief that rest is weakness. Let go of the lie that says you are behind. God is not done. God is not delayed. God is not reconsidering. God laughed today because He knows what is coming next, and it is bigger than what you feared losing, bigger than what you struggled to maintain, bigger than what you thought defined you. And when the time comes, you will look back at today and realize that God's laughter was never about your failure. It was about His faithfulness unfolding in ways you could not yet imagine. And let me press further into your spirit, because there is a confrontation God is bringing to you through this laughter. God laughed today because He saw how often you negotiate with fear. Instead of standing firm in trust, you entertain doubts as if they deserved a seat at the table of your decisions. You listened to inner voices that spoke urgency, scarcity, and defeat, even though God has never spoken to you in panic. God's voice carries clarity, not chaos. When confusion dominates, it is not because God stopped speaking, but because other voices became louder. God laughed because you underestimated the discipline of stillness. You thought movement meant progress, but sometimes obedience means waiting without losing faith. Waiting is not wasted time when God is involved. Waiting is alignment. Waiting is preparation. Waiting is training your heart to trust God more than your impulse to act. Many people move quickly and arrive empty. God moves deliberately and arrives fulfilled. Today you reacted to pressure, but God invites you to respond with wisdom. Reaction is emotional. Response is intentional. Reaction drains you. Response strengthens you. God laughed because He saw you growing beyond old patterns, even when you did not recognize it yet. The fact that you paused where you once exploded, reflected where you once panicked, prayed where you once complained, this is progress, even if it feels slow to you. God laughed because you tried to define yourself by what drained you instead of what sustained you. You focused on exhaustion instead of endurance. You focused on resistance instead of resilience. You focused on what you lack instead of the God who supplies without limitation. When you constantly stare at emptiness, you forget the source that fills. There is a danger in measuring life only by visible outcomes. God works invisibly before He works visibly. He shapes motives before He shifts circumstances. He corrects foundations before He elevates structures. God laughed because you thought nothing was happening while He was rearranging things beneath the surface in your favor. You must understand that God does not rush breakthroughs because sudden elevation without internal stability eats collapse. God loves you too much to give you what you want before you can sustain it. He is not withholding, He is preparing. He is not ignoring, He is refining. He is not silent, He is strategic. God laughed today because you tried to carry emotional weight that was never meant for you. You absorbed responsibility for other people's reactions, other people's expectations, other people's opinions. God never assigned you the burden of pleasing everyone. He assigned you the responsibility of remaining faithful. Anything beyond that becomes a weight that drains your spirit. God is teaching you to release what is not yours. Release guilt that belongs to the past. Release anxiety that belongs to tomorrow. Release comparison that belongs to insecurity. Release control that belongs to fear. God laughed because He saw you beginning to loosen your grip, even if it felt uncomfortable. There is a strength that comes when you stop trying to impress and start trying to align. Alignment brings peace. Alignment brings clarity. Alignment brings authority. God laughed because you were stepping closer to alignment than you realized. Today you may have felt unseen, but God saw every quiet decision you made to choose integrity over convenience. Integrity builds slowly, but it sustains powerfully. God trusts those who remain consistent when no one is watching. God laughed because He knows the weight of what He is entrusting to you requires a character deeper than applause. God laughed because you thought humility meant thinking less of yourself, when true humility means thinking of yourself accurately. You are not powerless. You are not insignificant. You are not forgotten. You are positioned under the care of an all-powerful God who governs outcomes far beyond your reach. There are moments when God allows you to feel your limitations, so you stop relying on your own strength. Self-reliance creates exhaustion. God-reliance creates endurance. God laughed because He saw you learning this lesson even through frustration. You questioned your capacity today, but God already accounted for your growth. You worried about sustaining what you have, but God is the sustainer. You feared losing momentum, but God is the one who establishes direction. Momentum without guidance leads to burnout. God prefers faithfulness over speed. God laughed because you thought your past disqualified your future. God does not erase your past, He repurposes it. He transforms lessons into wisdom wounds into compassion, and failures into discernment. Nothing surrendered to God remains wasted. God laughed because you kept revisiting doors He already closed. Closed doors are not punishments, they are protection. God sees what you cannot see. He blocks paths that would have drained you, delayed you, or distorted your purpose. Trusting God means trusting even His refusals. You must stop interpreting discomfort as danger. Growth often feels uncomfortable because it stretches you beyond familiar limits. God laughed because He knows what feels unfamiliar today will feel natural tomorrow. God is not intimidated by your questions. Honest questions deepen faith. What weakens faith is pretending you do not struggle. God laughed because you finally brought your doubts to Him instead of hiding them. Today you tried to solve internal emptiness with external fixes. God laughed because fulfillment never comes from accumulation. It comes from alignment. You can have more and feel empty, or have less and feel complete. God fills what the world cannot. God laughed because you worried about reputation, but God is shaping your identity. Reputation depends on people. Identity rests in God. When identity is secure, reputation loses power over you. There is a peace God gives that does not silence storms, but quiets your heart within them. God laughed because you were closer to that peace than you realized. Peace is not the absence of struggle. It is the presence of trust. You are not required to be strong every moment. You are required to remain connected. God's strength flows where dependence exists. Pride blocks it. Humility receives it. God laughed today because He knows that what you endured without quitting has already strengthened you. Endurance builds authority. Those who endure carry wisdom that shortcuts can never provide. God is training your discernment so you stop reacting to everything that demands attention. Not everything deserves your energy. Not every voice deserves your response. Not every battle deserves engagement. God laughed because you are learning to choose wisely. You must let go of the belief that your worth fluctuates with your performance. God's commitment to you is not fragile. He is steady when you are unstable, faithful when you are uncertain, constant when you are inconsistent. God laughed because you thought you were barely surviving, but you are actually being fortified. What feels heavy today will feel light when you realize how much stronger you have become. There is a version of you forming that will one day look back at this season with gratitude, not regret. Gratitude for the patience learned, gratitude for the pride stripped away, gratitude for the trust developed under pressure. God laughed because He already sees that version of you. He sees the maturity, the wisdom, the peace, the authority that is emerging. And while you are focused on what feels unresolved, God is smiling at what is already secured in His hands. So now, let this truth settle deep within you. God's laughter is an invitation. It is an invitation to rise above fear, to release what you were never meant to carry, to step out of the exhausting cycle of self-reliance and into the quiet strength of trust. God is not watching your life with disappointment. He is watching with authority, wisdom, and assurance. He knows where you are, why you are here, and what this moment is shaping inside you. Nothing has slipped out of His control, not today, not ever. Take a moment and examine your heart honestly. Ask yourself where fear has been allowed to speak louder than faith, where control has replaced surrender, where worry has disguised itself as responsibility. God is not asking you to condemn yourself. He is calling you to realign. Alignment does not begin with perfection. It begins with humility. It begins when you stop running from God and start resting in Him, when you stop defending your weakness and start trusting His strength. Let today be the moment you choose depth over distraction, trust over tension, surrender over striving. Let today be the moment you decide that God's voice will be the loudest voice shaping your thoughts, your decisions, and your direction. You do not need to fix everything before you come closer to God. You come closer so that everything begins to heal, settle, and fall into its rightful place. Walk forward with a heart that listens more then it reacts. Walk forward with a spirit anchored in God, rather than tossed by circumstances. Walk forward knowing that you are not defined by what you feared, what you failed, or what you could not control today. You are defined by the God who holds you, leads you, corrects you, strengthens you, and remains faithful even when you struggle to remain steady. Lift your trust higher than your uncertainty. Lift your obedience above your comfort. Lift your eyes beyond what you can see. God is not distant. God is not silent. God is not uncertain. He is present, intentional, and unwavering. Let His laughter free you from fear, awaken you to truth, and draw you into a deeper walk marked by confidence, peace, and reverence. And as you leave this moment, carry this with you. When you trust God more than your understanding, when you surrender more than you strive, when you listen more than you fear, you begin to live not under pressure, but under purpose, secure, anchored, and strengthened by the unshakable reality that God is with you, God is for you, and God remains in control.